didn't realise how sad I felt.
Welcome back, everybody. It is now 10 to 7 and I'm reconvening the overview and scrutiny meeting. We should have the live link back now. Yes, that's a thumbs up. We've also got the hot off the press new forward plan, which has got all of the pages in it. And the item just before we close that Councillor Harper was referring to is the item before the back page at the bottom there, emerging proposals for a new local plan. So we're there with all of the paperwork, and Councillor Cook, you were commenting. Councillor Cook, you were commenting on that, or were you just commenting that you didn't have that? Fine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just expressing my confusion that I couldn't see where the reference was because I was working from this. But
okay. So, Councillor Harper, if you would just run us through the two items that you suggested that you wanted the committee to look at.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so it's the, as you say, the item on emerging proposals for a new local plan and then the property disposal policy. I just think those are, well, the local plan, as we all know, and especially people who've been here in the council for a few years with the history of the last few local plans, know how, I was going to say controversial with a small c they tend to be, whether you do dispersal or nucleated or whatever policy you go through with. But often those sorts of decisions tend to be made quite early, so that then you've got a methodology the officers can work on. So I'm just thinking, whilst it might sound a bit anodyne, the title, if you like, the implications following on from that discussion potentially in September could be quite quite significant for the future.
If I could just interject there, you're consistent because we already have the property disposal policy on our work programme. So I think you did highlight that one last time. So we've already got that coming forward. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a local plan then.
Yep, so I'm happy to second that from the chair, that we add the pre-decision scrutiny of the emerging local plan onto our work programme. Has anyone got any other comments before I go to the vote? No? Votes in favour of adding that to our committee work programme? That's unanimous, thank you. Anyone else want to raise anything on the Cabinet Forward Plan? I can't see anybody indicating. So that takes us on to item 13, which is our committee's work programme. Obviously, we have this updated to include the seal charging levy on our reviews. And then the second page is everything that we've got coming forward. So with the arts and culture strategy in the Maidstone House we have tonight, the property disposal is September, and we've just added the emerging local plan. But has anybody else got any other comments they want to make on that? No? Oh, Councillor Cook.
If we're looking at our forward plan, just from what was being discussed earlier, do we need to amend that to include the SIL revision?
Yeah, that's on the first page. So we've got, ours is split into two. We've got our reviews on the first page, and then we've got our pre-decision or post-decision, pre-decision scrutiny or call-ins on the second page. So yes, we need to add the SIL onto the first page because it was missing.
So with that and so
with that in, yes, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Move that the work programme be noted. Is that agreed? So that moves us on to item 15 of tonight's agenda, which is the arts and culture strategy, pages 57 to 99, hopefully, of your agenda pack. The report's going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, sorry, it says Thompson, seeing Jeffrey, Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council, thank you. We have officers present to assist us, Anne-Marie Langley, Culture, Arts and Events Officer, and Angela Woodhouse, Director of Insight and Governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks like I'm subbing for Stephen tonight. You've got the papers here. It's a straightforward update. The last arts and cultures strategy was done in 2019 for 5 years, so we need a new one. As everybody knows, the benefits of arts and culture on society are wide-ranging, particularly around health and well-being and this sense of place. So there's been a number of consultations, there's been focus group work and so forth, and a huge amount of data in the appendix which shows the workup of this, and clearly it's also been aligned with the new corporate strategy to bring the arts and culture side up in terms of enriching people's lives. And we've identified 3 priorities around placemaking, accessibility and sustainability. And then in Appendix 5, you've got the detail of what needs to go on. Obviously, I've got Anne-Marie and Angela here for the complex, detailed, and tough questions you're going to ask them. Oh, well, actually, Anne-Marie, not Angela.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Harper, and then I'm going to move on to Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I think I was one of the people who suggested that we did pre-decision scrutiny on this. Obviously, I then chaired the Policy Advisory Committee when this came up. So I'm not going to say anything tonight, or a couple of points, but largely, supportive as I was then, because I think I moved the recommendations. Just as a bit of background, going back to 2018, I think I was the chair of the then council committee dealing with arts and culture. So the whole setup originally was something I'd been pushing when I became chair of the committee, and which led to the appointment of Anne-Marie and subsequently our first strategy, which has run its 5 years. And as Stuart said, it's time to renew it. And I must say, I am pleased that even though perhaps I was involved in kicking this off at the start, it was then continued by the then Conservative Council and now by the current council. So I think the recognition now is the importance and the centrality of arts and culture to not only the borough council, but to our communities, to the actual people of the borough. Prior to actually kicking off in 2019, it was a very neglected area. So I think we have achieved a lot over the last 5 years. We've got a lot more we can achieve over the next 5 years. I think there's a number of things which I would perhaps suggest to people you might want to think about tonight if we have much of a debate. The first one I spotted on page 78 was around venues, because one of the things which came out from the consultation, and I think anybody involved with sort of cultural life in Maidstone will know, is we don't have any large-scale venues. So you compare us to other towns of our size or even smaller, and they have much better venues. So Canterbury's got the Marlow, you've got, theatres and multi-purpose venues elsewhere. And I know it's something I've spoken with Stuart in the past about. Clearly, local government review has sort of, I don't know, kiboshed that, but I still think it would be worth over the next few years while we've still got Maidstone thinking about that, because it was raised with us. And the other thing I think is important to do work, and there are references in the 5-year plan, but when you look at Appendix 2, which is, if you like, the list of the arts organisations in the borough currently, they tend heavily to reflect the main ethnic group in the borough, which is the white community. There's a much less emphasis coming through on it. I know it's one of the things we picked up back in 2019 in terms of other communities and so on. So I would hope that over the next few years we can do work to try to address that. The benefits of multiculturalism are there for everybody to see. You get a much more vibrant society. You get people learning a lot more from each other's cultures, so it can work, at multiple levels. And I've seen that happen not just here, but when I pushed through an arts policy at Merton a long time ago, precisely about the benefits of people learning from one another. And I suppose my final point is it's great to see our commitment to having alternate yearly arts festivals, but I just wonder if perhaps over the next year or so, we could perhaps do a sort of review of some of the other towns and cities in the southeast where they have annual arts event festivals. I mean, I can think of one recently. I was at Reigate, where they do 2 every year. They've got a big tertiary college. We've got Mid-Kent College, and they do a lot of the work behind it. And Chichester, where I go to quite a lot, much smaller city than us, has got a much more annual festivals and so on. So I'm just wondering if perhaps thinking ahead, we could try to get something on a, an annual basis, not using necessarily public money, but involving others in, I say, not just the arts sector, but Mid Kent College and even perhaps the health authorities as well, because the health benefit, mental health benefit of arts and cultures, I think, is very well documented. So, and it'd be really great if we could have an annual arts festival in this borough, in Maidstone, doesn't matter if it's in the town or whatever, but it would start to put us really back onto the cultural map, which I know we're gradually getting back there. Definitely we are, but for a very long period of time, we sort of have vanished below the horizon. Thank you for that.
Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just an observation, really. I was just absolutely blown away by how many groups and things that we actually do have in the borough, which is brilliant. But I think I didn't know that. So do all our residents know of all the things that are going on in the borough? You know, I mean, I couldn't believe how many theatre groups there were, for example. And I was particularly intrigued by the Marmite Ukulele Club. I mean, anyway, sort of joking aside, I think this is a really, really good report. And all of these groups here that have been, did they all respond? Not all of them. That was what was going to be sort of my next question, really. All of these people were contacted. How many actually came back to you? But overall, I think it's absolutely great. Obviously, representing a sort of more rural area, I would like to think, you know, that the focus isn't always on the town centre, is that we try and spread things into our rural communities. Obviously, when I was working with my colleague, Councillor Russell, when that was her portfolio, I know how much work went into it, and I'm absolutely certain that the current cabinet members is doing the same. And so just sort of keep up the good work, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Just a very short one. As I was brought up in Redhill and Reigate, I'm ashamed to say I didn't even know Reigate had a festival. I've just looked it up and I'm going to tell my sisters off for not telling me. It does seem to be organised by a separate charity, though. I can't see any reference to Reigate Borough Council in there.
Thank you. Just before I go, if you'll indulge me from the chair, I just think it's not often in the council that we get to like see a problem and solve that problem. Lots of things are long term and lots of things are very intricate, but I thought it was just, I mean, it's a really good report, and obviously I was the previous cabinet member for it, so just really pleased to see it continuing to go from strength to strength. But on page 78, where you got your responses in, and it was, you know, access to exhibition space was a problem, then you've, you know, opened the new gallery and retail area, and so hopefully that's one of the solutions. So I think it's really good to see those two things. Right, I've got Councillor Kahili, I think, was next. Thank you.
Thank you. It was more of a sudden thought, so sorry, bear with me. It's something to do with what Councillor Parfitt said about things in the rural areas, and something that quite often comes up is that looks really good, but we can't get there because we can't get the bus there and back. So I wondered if there was at some point room to maybe discuss with public transport later options for buses or things when there is a festival or event on, just for that week, to maybe subsidise it, work with them to have, I think the latest bus to Coxheath is something like 9:30, which is not late when you don't want to be leaving a party at 9:15. No. Just a random thought that popped into my head. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know whether maybe that could go forward as a agenda item request to planning and healthier, stronger communities, or something they could have a look at. I don't know. I mean, I know that obviously we're not responsible for public transport, so it's a bit of a tricky one, but maybe something that they could look at, some form of a discounted something. I don't know. Councillor Oliver, were you indicating? No, sorry, I wasn't 100% sure. Councillor Parfitt.
I was just going to chip in there. I mean, certainly I know in the past I have worked with the bus companies, and, you know, when I went down to the depot, there was it was in Coxheath. We wanted the bus to go down the top of Gallants Lane, and they are you know, they will try and accommodate where they can. So I think it's certainly worth a conversation. We might not get anywhere, but I think it's worth pursuing that. It's a good suggestion.
If you don't ask, you won't get. Councillor Harper, were you indicating again?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. One group, and I'm just looking through Appendix 2, thinking of the last couple of points, which doesn't seem to be listed, is Changeling Theatre. Now, I don't know if people here might not know much about Changeling. I'm sure Marie does. But Changeling Theatre, I think they're based in Maidstone, in somewhere in the borough, and they're a touring theatre group. They do, at the moment, they're putting on a production of, oh gosh, I can't remember, one of the Shakespeare plays, one of the Henrys. And they take it to various venues, and they've been really successful over the last few years. Chelsea is one of the places they go to, and they've also in the past gone to places like Allington Castle and other sites actually within Maidstone. And they actually now, this year, they've moved, because they're building on their success, they're actually doing places like Poles and Lacey in Surrey and a couple of venues in London and down in Canterbury. And I just think it will be worth us thinking about the issues around public transport and some of the issues about being town-centred focus to possibly talk to groups like that. Because I know, there are a number of these sorts of theatre groups and other cultural groups who do quite a lot of sort of summer touring, outdoor theatre or outdoor cinema and so on. Excuse me. And I just wondered if we could perhaps make some contacts with those types of organisations that might be able to help us, bring more into the borough, but also get stuff going around the villages so everything's not completely focused on the town centre.
Anne-Marie's burning to answer some of those points, and then I have Councillor Cook.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to say we are actually working with the Hazlitt, and we have done for the last couple of years, to take outdoor theatre around the borough. So this year in August, they are going to 10 different venues, including Bredhurst and Stockbury, Marden, Lenham, and a few others that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're going to 10 different rural areas, and we're constantly looking to expand that and engage it. So yeah, we are working on that.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As we're, I'm mindful that of some of the pantomime groups that operate in the rural areas and put on their annual pantomimes are not mentioned here, and that is a huge local tradition throughout Kent. Personally, I put a shout out for the Hollingbourne one, which was always described as the Premier League of local pantomimes. But I'm mindful of the group that Councillor Harper was referring to. I saw them put on a Shakespearean play down in New Romney when I was chairman of Kent County Council. They do a sterling job. But I also wanted to pay tribute to the work that Cohesion do and the relationship that I think is developing between between Maidstone and Cohesion. And in terms of the areas of bringing together people of diverse backgrounds, I think there is the work that Cohesion do, not just in Maidstone, not just in Dartford, but further afield as well, is excellent. And I think that needs to be recognised and highlighted, because I think the points that Councillor Harper was making about the domination of whites on this, I think it's in some ways it's not actually helpful to take these sort of gender and ethnic thing, because it highlights the division rather than the diversity. I think what we want is events that bring people together, not because they're white, not because they're Asian or whatever the other groups were, but because it brings us together as a Maidstone local community, and that we can all enjoy it together without being aware of the differences in colour and race and what have you. And it's that's what I want to. That's the objective that I want to see these type of strategies work towards, because I think then we start to break down the barriers that keep people apart. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else indicating. So our options are on page 61 and 62, but I hope everyone will agree with me that we should propose the option which is to adopt the revised strategy and action plan. I propose that from the chair. I see Councillor Harper seconding, and we're going to build in the recommendation to the Cabinet that Councillor Kahili raised about whether transport from rural areas to events could be looked at in any way, and we'll leave that in their forum. So is everybody agreed? Lovely, thank you. So that moves us on to item 16, which is the first of our reviews that we'll be undertaking. Thank you very much for introducing that, and good luck with it all. You'll be busy. The empty properties review. So that was suggested to us when we looked at things to put on our programme at the start of the year, and we've got some information that's been provided to us by the Head of Revenues and Benefits at Mid-Kent Services, and Zoe Kemp will now introduce this report for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've given you a flavour of information, of the information we hold within the Revenues team about empty properties. As you know, for a number of years, we've been charging a premium on empty properties that goes from 100% up to 300%. So we've currently got 210 properties that have been empty for more than a year. And in table 1, I've given you information about the amount that's charged. And that's broken down into how long the properties have been empty and the amount that the balance that's outstanding, just to show you that we do collect on these empty properties. And in fact, some of them, you know, they pay up front the whole charge up to 400% at the beginning of the year. Table 2, I've given you the bands broken down to show you that the amount of properties is spread across all bands, and the only one it mirrors the amount of properties that we have per band, apart from band D seems to be quite low. And then following a discussion we had before I put the briefing note together, I've given you the amount of properties by landlord for registered social landlords. Just to put a bit of context behind this, quite often there's a reason behind, for example, the Riverside Housing, that's a scheme development just across the road over there in Pudding Lane, where they've acquired that and they were previously empty. And there's been problems at the site. Some of you may be aware it's the former Army and Navy Cheeseman's building above that. It just, some of them they've only taken on within the last year. They haven't necessarily held them for all that time. And then I've given you just the properties that have been empty for the longest period up to 2010, and just a bit of a description behind them so that you can see that there's no rhyme or reason behind why they're empty. There's various reasons, and we do work between my team and John's team to try and get them back into use again. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think whilst we all might imagine there's lots of empty properties that could be used, I think it shows us there's not too many, like 210 properties across the whole borough, and they've also got, you know, varying reasons for them. So it seems like every single one has a story behind it. And also the council tax is being paid. So, you know, it seems that people, for whatever reason, want to keep some of these in the family or with the social landlords. Maybe they've got other ideas for them, or they're being refurbished. So I thought it was very interesting. And it gave some clarity, I guess, to the review, but I wasn't sure there was too much more that we could really do on this or suggest that we do on this. I don't know. I'm opening it up to the floor. Has anybody got any suggestions? Councillor Field.
Just to say, broadly in agreement, Chair, I don't think further scrutiny is going to change anything that that's outlined in the report. So I would support your idea that we perhaps pack this one up and have another think about what we look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. It's information that I never knew, so it was good to look at it. But it's not. I don't see much mileage in where we go from here. But I don't know. Take Councillor Harper and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think to a certain extent I agree with you. I'm surprised there's so few properties because I'm Councillor Millam and myself are aware of one in our ward which has been empty for a very long period of time, and the people owning it have never shown any interest in doing anything to it. And I'm surprised it's not listed in these places which have been empty since 2010. But I suppose the most interesting thing is that table 3, isn't it? Which is the empty properties owned by housing associations, and including one actually owned by us, which has been empty for almost year and a half. I mean, in particular, if you look at Golding Homes, I mean, there's 16 units as well as the Riverside and then Hyde and Albert considerably lower. But I didn't know if there was would have been any use in having a discussion with Riverside and Golding as to why do they have such large numbers of voids for a long period of time. I mean, if Golding Homes have had 16 properties empty since 2010, that's 15 odd years, and we have, I assume it's probably properties which we would have had nomination rights to. It'd be interesting to understand why they're empty whenever we can do within our the property acquisition budget, we're buying up houses on the private market to actually house people from our housing list. And I'm thinking if these housing associations have largish numbers of properties empty for long periods of time, then you wonder why we're having to buy all these properties on the open market when perhaps Golding Homes could have taken 16 families. For us to buy 16 houses in the borough, you're talking of, I would have thought, millions. Yet there seems, for 15 odd years, potentially properties which could have housed homeless people. So that's a question which doesn't necessarily need a complete committee meeting, but I think it'd be worth asking Golding Homes to perhaps give a bit more information.
I think what I might do in first instance is ask John Littlemore if he wants to come in on some of those, because I think you might have some info on some of these ones, why there's the numbers, haven't you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I should point out that not all of those 16 units have been empty since 2010. I think it's actually only one of those. You're quite right. I mean, we don't want to see empty homes being left when we know there's a huge demand for social housing. But we do work very regularly with our housing association partners, so we do know exactly what's happening with each of those 16 units, for example, that Golding Homes manage, and we're satisfied that they are being held empty at the moment for good reasons. As you know, Golding Homes has a major refurbishment programme being carried on at the moment, so some of these units will be units that are continuously moved around to enable decants to happen, for example. Others where significant remedial works are being undertaken because of the issues that we've had in the past around cladding and fire safety. So there are good reasons why units are empty at the moment, and we are working with the landlords to ensure that they're turned around as soon as possible. We will be reviewing our empty home strategy this calendar year. So if the committee is interested in seeing that as it works its way through the governance structure, I'm sure you can ask for that to come to your committee, and we can have a further conversation about what our strategy is and how we will help tackle empty homes with homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Regarding the Golding Homes 16 empty properties, I've had a number of residents that have been decanted into properties for repairs, and I often wondered how did they have those spare properties, and because they do have a lot of properties that do need a lot of repairs on them. So that is probably why. Going on the table 1, obviously there's been a massive increase in properties being vacant. And I was just wondering the story behind that. Is it because of an increasingly ageing population, and also what could be used to incentivise people to sell their houses?
Interesting. I'll pass that over to Zoe, if I may.
Thank you. So we start off with the properties that are empty now, and some will be empty for a few days in 2025. You know, some go on for longer. The 96 back to 2023, some of them will be deceased cases, and as you know, it sometimes takes a while to get probate, and then families have to decide what they're doing with properties. Sometimes people buy properties that have been empty, or for example, a case where it has been an estate of somebody, and the refurbishment of it takes longer than they think. As you know, it takes longer now to get supplies. Sometimes everything costs a bit more. You only have to watch Grand Designs or a program like that to see that everybody's project overruns and costs more than they think. So it does gradually, you know, then we're down to 2022, it's 44, and then it's really good to see it drops from 2019 to 2021. It really drops down into the teens, and then we're down to really single figure numbers after that. So it's really far more promising than you might think it would be. But there are always these properties that we try to get hold of the owners, and sometimes it's very difficult to build up a relationship with them and to get over the barriers of why they don't want to sell a property. And particularly sometimes with landlords, if they've got a very high mortgage on it and it needs a lot of repairs, it's very difficult for them to sell and come out of it with any money.
Thank you. Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to wondered, there's a property in Cox Heath, which I'm surprised is not on this list. The Heath Road property, which is like Sleeping Beauty's castle. I think the house has almost been demolished by nature now. You can't even get to it. It's unbelievable. It just shows the power of nature and what it can do. And I just wondered why that wasn't on this list, because I know it's been vacant for, yeah, but it's not on it. But it's on the Heath Road, or the access to it is on the Heath Road.
So it would be privately owned, the property.
Sorry,
it would be private. It's a privately owned property.
It is a privately owned property. It's caused quite a lot of problems because it's actually, the trees have grown over so much that it's causing damage to the neighbours' walls and all sorts of problems. And I know that one of the neighbours has written to Alison a number of times, quite frustrated because there's nothing that really can be done, but it's not on this list. So I just wondered why, or if you were aware of it.
I think Heath Road does ring a bell with me. So yeah, I think it's on our radar. But like you say, it's very difficult if somebody doesn't want to do anything with this property.
And they're paying the council tax. Yeah.
I would guess so, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Parfitt, turn your microphone. I've got Councillor Cook next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to thank the officers for the report. I think it's very helpful. It's very interesting, but obviously it's a statement at a point in time of fact. The issue then becomes, so what do we do about it? And I think that was where I was particularly interested by what John Moore was saying about we will be reviewing the empty homes policy shortly, and I think that's something that I would like to have a look at. Obviously, I think that's should be of huge interest to everybody, and how we can maybe then tie that in with issues surrounding homelessness as well, and making sure that we don't leave properties empty for too long, and we maybe adopt something along the lines of no use empty. and have a pot of capital that could be drawn down by ways of loans and what have you to get these properties back into use and maybe enlarging our own stock as a means of doing that towards the 1,000 houses was the very much the ambition of the last administration. So thank you for the report. It's very interesting. I hope we can have a serious look at the policies surrounding this and how we then approach that to the benefit of not just the properties but the people that need to live in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. When I was a councillor in Shepway, came across something similar to this. And I understand that this is a very complex and multifaceted side. There is no one reason, there is a plethora of reasons. But I'm grateful that there is a surplus on our accounts and they are made to pay. And picking up a point of Councillor Cook, I think the balance of profits from this, if we can call them profits or balances, should be put towards our fund for building council houses. And we can hopefully see that then that is something positive is coming of it. I'm not suggesting we take the pedal off empty properties, but to see the funds used positively, I think would be, in my eyes, something positive we can do.
Thank you. I can't. Oh, sorry, Zoe.
Just to make it clear, that's the total amount of council tax we collect on those properties. Obviously, we only keep 13% of that. So most of it will go to the county.
Every little bit helps.
Okay, I can't see anybody else indicating. So mindful that we asked for the review and we've had the information. I think we've investigated the information. I think my recommendation would be that we're satisfied on that basis, that there's some good reasoning behind the properties that we have empty on our list. But that I think the offer from Mr. Littlemore to have a look at the empty homes strategy, which is coming forward later in the year, maybe we could ask for that as the committee to do some pre-decision scrutiny on it. So that would be by recommendation from the chair. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Cook. And is that agreed as a way forward? Thank you very much. That's agreed. And that moves that item on. This takes us back. Oh, actually, before we do this, regarding the minutes that I said we were going to do later, there are a few more than just a couple of words missing. So I said we're not going to do that now. We're going to leave last meeting's minutes, and we'll have a look at them. They'll be in our agenda packs for the next meeting. We'll agree both at the same time. Is that agreed as a way forward? Thank you, because I think the printer's gone a bit manic and that doesn't make sense. So that brings us on to our last item of the agenda, which is item 14, which is the receipt of the call-in for the refurbishment of Maidstone House and the Link. So this is us acting in our capacity doing post-decision scrutiny. This has already been agreed by Cabinet as our visitors take their seats. Thank you very much for coming today, and we're going to have the report to introduce to us by Councillor Summersgill, who's the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery. Oh, yeah, I did say him. Yeah, sorry. Over to you, Councillor Summersgill. I was right.
Thank you very much. Before we move to any detailed financial discussions, and while the topic is heard in public, I'd like to counter some misconceptions raised in local press reports about Maidstone House, and perhaps those reports also included misinterpretations from discussions at previous council deliberations. Maidstone House has tenants. It is not solely occupied by Maidstone Borough Council employees, and in reality we only inhabit between 1/4 and 1/3 of the floor space in Maidstone House. The building has always had tenants. It had 2 to 3 floors occupied by other businesses and government departments when we bought the 199-year-long lease in 2021. We want those tenants and more tenants to continue paying Mason Borough Council rent and potentially a higher rent for modernised and better EPC compliant floors. Addressing the history briefly, a business case to acquire Mason House and the link was made to the Policy and Resources Committee in July 2021 with a budget of 7.5 million. Noting that a substantially lower purchase price was then agreed, perhaps related to the building condition assessment or some other evaluation, a budget of £500,000 was then put to a later P&R committee to fund capital investment works and upgrades. And a report specifically mentioned in 2022 that low carbon technologies were to be considered. An energy audit followed. A 5.85 million project for decarbonisation was formulated in detail during 2022-23, and a grant application submitted in November 2023, which was approved by Salix in February 2024. In January 24, the then council leader specifically approved a project that included a replacement low carbon heating system, replacement glazing, full insulation of the building, upgrading of lighting to LED, and solar panels on the linked terrace roof. You will see most of these in the current proposal. This project landed with me in June 2024, and the scheme was approved at my first cabinet in July last year. MBC then sought tender prices for the predefined and projected 5.85 million project, but these came in greatly higher, more than 50% of the earlier estimates from 2023, which is why we've had to reassess and redesign the project over the last 6 months. As to decarbonisation being an unnecessary and unproven luxury at this point in time, floors 2 and 3 at Mason House have had air source heat pumps since 2015, more than 5 years before we took on the lease. They have functioned fully for over a decade, so we are not adding unproven technology to our floors. We're also improving the working conditions for our staff and the tenants on floors 4 to 6. Only a couple of weeks ago, in the second heat wave this year, the misfunction in air cooling systems meant the IT systems for Maidstone Council, Swale and Tunbridge Wells councils could not function, and staff were unable to work in Maidstone House and elsewhere in our estate, and this included our commercial tenants. Anyone who's been in the floors in summer will note the excess heat on window seats on the sunniest side, which changes location during the working day to the other side of the building. And then in winter, there is a need for extra portable heaters on floors to maintain suitable working temperatures. The linked terrace, also part of this project, is a valuable source of local business participation, incubator workplaces and modern collaborative practices. It is occupied within the town by people who spend in the local economy, not in out-of-town mobile coffee shops, as do the tenants in the Mason House floors, and of course our own staff spend daily in the shops below. By completing this project, we will be ensuring that modern working facilities with decarbonised criteria are part of the tenancy offer to forward-looking companies who increasingly demand such facilities but cannot find them in town centres. It will provide Mason Borough Council with a suitable return on investment, an increase in occupancy levels and potential higher rental income, plus much more hospitable working spaces for our own staff. I commend this project to the committee, and Councillor Cox has a further couple of points to add.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Summersgill. So I'm going to look at this very much from a financial and business case perspective, true to form. So first of all, I think one thing just to add to what Mike's just said is the low carbon technology that was agreed back at the time of the original investment decision in 2021. It did recognise the need for capital investment and a sinking fund, and that's in the capital budget today. So just with that backdrop, the original business case is not what's under scrutiny here. That's not what we're here to do. What we're here to do is to look at the decision that's in front of us now. And given that the works are now internal to the building, when we look back at the proposal, when we came in last year, both Mike and I as new councillors, one of the things that I was very nervous about was the amount of work that was required externally, the movement of heavy plant around in very restricted space. And in any investment case where you've got an amount of uncertainty, that means extra risk, and usually extra risk means more cost. So I was really pleased to see this proposal, we'll go through it in a second, that the work is internalised. And that means it's more within our control, and not quite using the phrase plug and play. But if one area, for whatever reason, can't come online in the building programme, and Charlotte and Mark can talk about this much more than I can, then we can move to another. So that gives it much more certainty. Moving more externally, office accommodation inquiries or demand inquiries are being received by the council. Not enough yet to identify it as a trend, but certainly it's an uptick. And I did some work earlier, just having a look around at the type of accommodation that's available in the town centre, and actually quite a broad sweep, so including places like Turkey Mill as a town centre. Of this sort of size, and not necessarily to accommodate the whole council, but 10,000 square feet and up. And it's a tiny number of properties that's available, and you can take your own view on the quality. Central town or town centre office accommodation is important. It's really important for the economy. You know, whenever I walk through, I'm coming from here and going to Maidstone House, and if you walk through the mall, you can't do that without seeing sort of like almost you can tick off the number of officers you see and other suppliers and other stakeholders that interact with the council. And that to me just demonstrates just how many people come in to the town centre because of the building, and actually are interacting with its businesses and its coffee shops, as Mike said. So sorry, I've spoken about that. As the surveys have progressed in the last 8 months, just turning our thoughts back to when last November we decided that the proposal as it stood was not the right one. One of the things we asked the officers to do was to continue looking for proposals, and many surveys have continued. And it's clear from those surveys, and again, Charlotte and Mark can talk about this much more compellingly than I can, that we're dealing with a different building than that the Salix grants were based upon. Just for the avoidance of doubt, the council was able to recover 90% of the cost of the Salix grant process. So just so you know. But as Mike said, the building is not performing currently. The server room overheating and literally taking out the systems, not just of Maidstone Council, but Swale, Tunbridge and Malling, and actually really worryingly, the tenants in the building, because they're commercial businesses and we need them to do well as we need our own operations to survive. And temperatures are rising, 35.8 in Faversham just 2 weeks ago, cited in national news. And the building, as Mike said, it's 360. It's not possible to regulate temperature by area. So one side of the building can be absolutely Sahara, while the other side is sort of like, you know, nigh on North Atlantic. We're importing air conditioners in the summer, and in the winter we're using infrared heaters, which worry me because they just look so red and angry and glary. But you can still see people sitting in one of those and still with a coat on. And that's not a pleasant place to work, which is important. I'll come on to that in a second. Sorry, I can't turn the page. We've got to provide a safe and attractive place for our staff to work. People work best where they are comfortable, in fact. We need to respond and be available to the return to office call. And I know there are many dissenters who believe that isn't happening. It is happening. And that will that's leading and will continue to lead to increased space inquiries. And we've got to both retain and attract new tenants. And the reason that's so important for both the council and the taxpayer is it brings in the revenue and the income we generate from the rent from those tenants is a vital income stream to the council's revenue budgets. And that's obviously gets recycled, but we need that year in, year out. It's not a short-term thing. And the spend for this project will come from capital, and that has already been set aside and is in the budget, as I said. Under the previous administration, the economic development team actually completed a refurbishment of floor 1,
And that floor is well occupied. And what's really interesting is it's the exact same technology and equipment and insulation that is proposed to that now for the upper floors. So we've got a test case, we've used it, we've looked at the learnings, and we're wanting to roll it out further. And there's some other examples too of where this type of renovation has taken place. So one is Gale House, which to me is along there, down there and across the road and about there, and Maidstone's own Business Innovation Centre. So it's exactly the same. So why would we not have the same standard for this building, which to me is our flagship building? It's a vital building in the town centre. We've talked about the business and custom that it brings locally, but it also supplies our stakeholders and visitors and actually just sets the tone and the drumbeat for how we're going to operate. So we've got 6.7 million construction and 1 million of commercial and decount costs. And that's what is a huge amount of money, please don't get me wrong, but it's significant savings compared to the previous project, and it safeguards the council's investment in both Maidstone House, and it protects and actually increases interest in rental income. And for me, a point we should not overlook, and to me it's a very important point. In 2018, the Conservative Party introduced a bill, the EPC-EEES bill, and that is all about compliance with emissions. As things stand, this building, Maidstone House, will not be compliant with that. And actually it's mandatory to be currently to be compliant by 2030. So there's a lead time between now and getting us there. And it's mandatory for all private rented accommodation, which we fall into the category of. And this is a case, whether or not we think we can push the can down the road a bit, kick it down the road, put it off for a little while, we've got to lead by example, I'm afraid. If we want other people in our community to be following these guidelines, I think we have to lead. And there is an exemption clause on that, just in case anyone's aware of that, where you can apply for a 5-year exemption. However, that exemption is only applicable to the person, the entity, the business named on the certificate. It's not transferable, and it cannot either be assigned. So if we in future sell or need to assign it to another party, thinking local government reorganisation, a unitary authority, that certificate would not be valid. And to me, that is one of the most crucial points, because it means we're walking into a crisis where that building would be worth virtually nothing. And I don't think we can allow that on our watch. Today's proposition, 70% reduction in heating costs, and that's just from an economic perspective is compelling. Further cost reduction on non-aircon and non-bright orange heaters, avoidance of server room meltdowns in future and obviously interruption, attracting, retaining staff and tenants, and obviously supporting the local economy. So what's the alternative if you weren't to approve this today? Well, don't do the work, right? But that would forego, as is tenancy, rental income of 11.4 million over 10 years. It would have diminished staff retention, increased recruitment cost in replacing those staff, and these are all extra costs that people often overlook. And obviously the running costs, even in the next 2 years, would also be higher, and the asset value would degrade. The other alternative is we sell the building. Well, market value estimated now 4.0 million, less in 2 to 3 years. And that means a conservative, a 3.2 million asset loss based on its original investment thesis in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't see how we can argue that. And on top of that, let's not overlook two final points here, sorry. NBC, if it were not tenants in that building, would have to pay commercial rates to be a tenant elsewhere. And that's an additional cost of 6.0 million, call it 6 million for 10 years alone. Sorry, there was one more point I wanted to make. In terms of the sale value, so we've said 4 million at today's rate. The sale value is typically pinned on a 10 times multiple of rental income. So it looks out 10 years. So if it were to be sold with these improvements, that takes, depending on which scenario here you use, either the value to 11.2.
I'm just going to take a point of order from Councillor Cook.
Madam Chairman, I just want to clarity that the cabinet member has just mentioned figures that are actually on the yellow pages. Are we in public session or are we in private session at the moment?
We are in part one.
We're in part one. So the cabinet has mentioned that the building is currently valued at 4 million.
Okay.
That is yellow pages. And so can we now establish that that is now in the public domain and we can actually have a debate based on what the cabinet member has introduced into the public section, please?
I'll clarify with the cabinet member what she intended to reveal, but from a procedural point of view, that's not an open invitation to go into the yellow pages. But
so on the rental income, I was outlining scenarios, not actual numbers. And yeah, I think for an open debate, we definitely should go into yellow pages. But I hope all the principles that I've outlined to you remain valid. Thank you.
so look, you wanted to come back?
I'd just like to come back. So can we be clear, the current value of the building against which we wish to look at this is, as has been, and I'm just quoting the cabinet member, I'm not quoting the yellow pages, it's £4 million. Whatever's in the yellow pages is immaterial now, because what we have is a figure that the cabinet member has mentioned, a building that's worth £4 million that we are being asked to agree to spend over £7 million on. I'm just wondering whether the cabinet member has the value of what the building will actually be worth when the work's done. Thank you.
I think that would take us into yellow pages. Councillor Harper, if it's a point of order, I'll hear it. If it's a comment, I've got people before.
No, it's not a comment. I think we're in danger of straying into yellow papers, given the nature of this debate, and a lot of the discussion will probably revolve around the yellow papers, I imagine. So what I was only going to suggest was, we've heard from the cabinet, the two relevant cabinet members. Perhaps if the three of you, say yourself, Councillor Parfitt, and the statement from Councillor Forepaugh be read out, and then
I'm
we
the
go
chair,
into yellow.
so I'll see which way we're going, but thank you for your input. We will move on. This was called in by myself, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Parfitt, and Councillor Forecast has given us a statement. So I will just check with the cabinet member if she'd finished her introduction.
I was just going to say I welcome technical and business and commercial questions. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And I will ask Jordan to read out the statement for Councillor Forecast.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is a statement provided by Councillor Forecast ahead of today's meeting. Dear colleagues, apologies I could not be with you tonight due to work commitments. I do not wish to take up too much of your time this evening, but I urge you to please reconsider this project, or at least allow it to be debated by all elected members in just 24 hours' time. I truly believe it is absurd to spend £7.7 million of taxpayer money on eco-refurbishing this council building when the property itself is worth a significantly less market value. With a questionable return on investment and potential local government reorganisation ahead, this is a totally inappropriate use of public funds. I am also concerned that all options have not been considered and that key financial information has been withheld from the public when it is in their interest to know it. There must be a better suited way forward. I therefore urge you to reject this proposal or allow full council to debate it in its entirety tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. As one of the callers in, I just have a couple of questions for clarity, if I might. Which might help us with the discussion, whichever way it goes. So in the white papers, the purchase price of Maidstone House was 7 million. Is that correct?
7.07.
Thank you. And is floor 4 currently occupied?
Floor 4 is not currently occupied.
And it was mentioned in here that the council had recovered 90% of the costs of the Salix grant. Can I just clarify then, so 10% was not recovered. What is the amount of that 10% that was not recovered?
Quite a proportion of those costs were attributed to internal journal transfers, so things like planning applications, pre-planning advice, which you can imagine was quite substantial for a large project of that nature. There were some costs that actually attributed before the Salix grant began. So we've accounted for costs for the whole life cycle. It's actually slightly further than the cost that was quoted there. It was actually more in the realms of 94%. Be happy to provide the exact figures outside of this meeting.
So the Salix grant was for the 17 million, which was the proposal for last year. So can I take it that it's 90% of the 17 million that was, or is it of a different figure?
May I ask where 17 million had come from?
Councillor Cock.
It's on page 47 of your pack. At the bottom, section 2.6. Thank you.
So 90% of the 3.1 million. Right, I wanted to get that correct before we move on.
No, that's not correct.
Oh.
So that was the Salix grant. It's not awarded in whole and then you give it back. What happens is you provide invoices like you do a claim for receipts. And so whatever you've actually spent to date is all that you can claim. So I make your point regarding the 3.1 million, but if you do have a look at 2.6 on page 47, the actual full project cost was 212.35, and you can see there that 316,277.49 was claimed from Salix. I hope that helps.
That does, thank you. Right, I think that was my questions. I've written down those answers. So I then turn to Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Chairman. Not really a lot to add because I think it is really, for me, the important thing here is we are spending a huge amount of money. It's not money that we have lying around, it's money that's going to have to be borrowed. And I think it is really important that this is debated. I think it's really important that all councillors, because we are just a small number of the whole council. And I think when we're talking about this level of investment, I think all councillors should have an opportunity to have a say. I think listening to Councillor Cox, I don't think anybody, or certainly from our side, or calling it in, are suggesting that we don't spend any money on this building, or that people should be required to work in inclement or unsuitable circumstances. Nobody wants that. But I think what we need to know is that if we are going to spend this amount of money, that it is value for money, and we are not throwing good money off to bad. Sometimes you have to cut your losses, and I think it is really important that we actually debate this and everybody has a say. Thank you. That's all I want to say for now. I'm not saying I won't have more to say later, but I just think everybody should have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I quite agree. This is a significant investment. Councillor Cannon, I've got you next.
Thank you, Chairman. In previous meetings, I've sort of mentioned lots of concerns about this project, but I sort of agree with what's been mentioned. I think it should go to full council. We're in a situation where this council and authority is going to cease to exist. It's a huge sum of money, £7 million to be spending on what the cabinet member mentioned was a £4 million building. So I feel, you know, if the building's worth £4 million and we're proposing to spend 7 million, all councillors need to be involved in that decision. And tomorrow we can have a fuller debate with people who are aware of this, and we should have all councillors deciding it. So I'd like to see it referred to full council tomorrow.
Can I just ask, you sounded like you were headed towards a motion there. Was that a motion to debate this at full council?
Yeah, I'm happy to put that forward.
We've got a seconder for that, Councillor Parfitt. So there's a motion on the table, which is that we debate this tomorrow at full council, thereby allowing everybody in the council to have a say based on the residents that they represent, given that it is a significant amount of spend that the council will be making. So I'll vote on the motion first. So have we got votes in favour of discussing this?
Point of order.
Oh, point of order, carry on.
Members may wish to comment on the motion before they vote.
We can comment on the amendment, you mean? The motion to take forward, yes, let's open it to talk about the motion, fine. And I've got, providing that these people were in order to talk on the motion that's now put forward, not the original report. So I've got Councillor Harper first. Are you on the motion? Okay, Councillor Harper.
I think before we decide to send this to full council tomorrow night, I think we should have a debate on it this evening, because we've got the relevant officers before us tonight, and we can have a debate where we can ask questions as we go through, probably talk about the yellow pages, but whatever. But we've got, as I say, we've got the two officers here, but if we do it at full council tomorrow, we won't have officers present who will be able to answer particular points. And also, whilst we'll have all, I don't know, all 49 counts, I was going to say 55, that's the old number. Whilst in theory they're all present, I would think that's the last agenda item, as it would inevitably be, because it's got a load of yellow papers with it. I'm not sure the debate would be any better than it would be if we had a discussion tonight to just come to a view. And our discussion at the end this evening may be that, I can't remember, there's those options, weren't there? We do nothing. So the current decision stands. We ask for a further review or whatever, or we ultimately do push it forward to tomorrow night. But I think if we don't do that now, I'm just concerned we'll get to tomorrow and we'll have an uninformed debate. People who haven't been, involved either at the committees or in the cabinet or tonight, and it will just end up being a shambles and not achieving anything. Whereas, we're here tonight, we've got the time allocated to it, and I would have thought it's better, at least at this stage in the debate, not to approve the current motion, but to have a discussion on this now.
Okay, I've got Councillor Mackay to speak to the motion.
Certainly, I believe that it needs a wider audience. But let's be frank about this. The rabbit is out of the hat tonight. We can't now have yellow papers because the fundamental value of you bought something for 7 million, is now valued at 7 million, but you want to spend another 7 million, is out there. It's out there, it's in the public domain. And we've raised way more questions here. The public will be demanding an answer for. And we have a duty to be frank and candid. There might be issues regarding a tender document that might be withheld, but the fundamental sums must be in the public domain, and all councillors must be aware of them. It's we cannot say, oh yeah, we're going to discuss it tomorrow and we're still going to have the yellow pages. It's ridiculous.
Okay, I've got Councillor Rodwell to speak to the motion.
Speaking about asking specific questions to Councillor Cox.
Okay, I'll
Well, I could
hold
do that.
you in abeyance.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Nagy to speak to the motion.
My point was in regards to what Councillor Cox had raised.
Sorry, I'm just running through my list when I saw your hands fly up. I didn't want to miss anyone. So Councillor Keeley to speak to the motion.
No, it was a specific question about things that had been said. Thank you.
Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I think the motion is clearly demonstrated by the responses of colleagues around the table is premature, so I wouldn't seek to support it Regarding Councillor Mackay's comments on the motion, I think it's incredibly important tonight that we do not take a single number out of context and throw it around in public when the other numbers cannot be shared. I would also say that unless we're given very specific advice by our Section 151 officer, I'm not keen that we do share the other numbers. But I think it's very important that we are mindful, if we wish to discuss the numbers, we do so in full context, because that, I feel, is incumbent upon us in fulfilling our duty to the public. So I'm aware there's a couple of numbers flying around, but I think if, as a committee, we wish to talk numbers, then we need to be able to talk numbers, which means going into closed session so that the numbers can be properly debated, understood and advised upon by officers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, at the moment we're still just discussing the motion. So I've got Councillor Cook, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a bit disappointed with Councillor Harper's views and his assessment of the capabilities of the rest of the members of the council. He seems to have a rather dim view of people being able to assess this and act appropriately. I will support the motion because I think it is such an important issue for a relatively small number of members of the council to, and of course it needs to be remembered that this was a cabinet decision. Had it not been called in, we wouldn't be having this debate now, and nor would there be a potential for a debate tomorrow. It's purely as a result of the call in that all of this has come to light in the way that it has, and I think Malcolm is absolutely right to say what he just said, that what we have here is a proposal to spend over £7 million on a building that's worth £4 million. What it will be worth once the work is done remains to be seen in a time span which frankly is very, very concerning. And we're not spending our money, we're spending the residents' money at the end of the day. And I don't think the residents would, most residents wouldn't do that on their own house. And I don't see why we should indulge ourselves by doing it on this building at this time. I would far prefer to see the whole council take that decision than effectively us as a small overview and scrutiny committee pass that through this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I was just checking in the Constitution if you actually could do a point of order. It says a member. Our Constitution is not clear, so I'm going to be generous and say yes, because you're not a member of the committee.
Oh, I'm not a member of the committee, but I am here to be scrutinised by the committee. So I would appreciate that opportunity. But Councillors Cook and Cannon have made a couple of points that are inaccurate. If this goes to full council tomorrow, full council will not make a decision on this. It will still go back to cabinet for decision. Full council can have the debate on it tomorrow, but it can't make a decision on it because it is a cabinet decision. I just thought I'd clarify that.
Thank you. That is important. Yes, quite correct. Okay. Normally we'd just move to the motion, but Councillor Cox.
There's been a lot of discussion about what's in the public domain tonight. Just to be clear, the 7.07 purchase price in the public domain, the 7.7 million project price is in your white papers. The 4 million is an estimate, right? It could be 4, it could be 6, it could be whatever. It's not a hard and fast number. The point I was making was about the multiple. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I've heard everyone. My issue with this as well, point of information for everybody. We've got a motion on the table that I'm prepared to vote on now. If the motion passes, that is the end of this item in overview and scrutiny, because it's moved to another chamber for debate, which is full council. I just want the committee to have full awareness of that, and I want to just look around the room again and see if anybody else is minded to speak before I move to the vote. I can't see anybody indicate. Oh, Councillor Nagy on the motion.
Sorry, just to clarify then. So if, because in regards to the motion, if we are to bring this into council tomorrow, I do think it is very short notice to drop this on to the council for everyone. I mean, if we've had obviously time to go over all of this, but I don't feel that just dropping this in tomorrow on the council would be very fair on everyone to have a time to go over everything.
Sorry, Councillor Nagy, I disagree with that. We've had this as an item before, albeit with a different cost. Ultimately, that's what we've signed up for, reading lots of paper in a short amount of time. It's not that big a report. For me, that doesn't wash. So there's a motion on the table, and I will get the wording once.
I just wanted to clarify. I take what Kath, the cabinet member is saying now, but her exact words earlier were that a current valuation.
Okay, we're not doing tit for tat. I think we're all aware of the figures involved. So the wording for the motion to propose is that Overview and Scrutiny Committee feel that this is a significant spend for the council. It therefore warrants further scrutiny by all members in the chamber at full council, given that we are elected to represent residents of the whole borough on this high spend item. On that basis, we recommend that the decision be reviewed by full council. Councillor Kehealy, quickly.
Thank you. It is on the motion. Can we just be clear what the consequences are of our vote today, tomorrow, with what happens if it goes to full council tomorrow, because it's changed around a bit and I want to make sure I make the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just double checking that. So we have the wording for our recommendation, which will go forward into the papers for tomorrow's full council. That will then be how it's normally introduced, a report from Overview and Scrutiny. So it will be introduced at full council tomorrow using that wording. The item will be as it is for us tonight. Obviously, the extra pages will be in. We've got a placeholder in full council already. And then, but ultimately, as Councillor Jeffrey said, full council is not the decision-making body, so it can only send recommendations back to Cabinet. The Dem Services Officer was just saying that the link to the papers is already within the published agenda. So the papers can be accessed via that link. So all members tomorrow will be able to have knowledge of that, and then we can share a copy on the day. Yes. Councillor Kehealy.
Thank you. I'm just slightly concerned that there's questions we want to ask and they're not necessarily going to get answered before we make this decision. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was just taking advice on this. Obviously, this doesn't happen every day. So we can park that for a bit. We can ask any questions that we want to ask in part 1. We can decide whether we want to go into part 2 to ask financial questions, but we will ultimately be coming back to that motion that is on the table and seconded. I have got some people that I had written down to ask questions originally, so I'm preparing to go back to that list. And the first one I had on there was Councillor Cannon.
Well, if I'm out of order, do say, but I just wanted to say that in moving that motion, I didn't want to stifle questions and debate. So, I mean, I'm glad that is the process, that plan's a good plan.
Lovely, a well worked out plan. I love it. I had, going back to my original list, I've got Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, sorry, the point I wanted to bring up to, I mean, if Councillor Cox brought up the point in 2.5 about the minimum energy efficient standard requirements that are coming up in 27 and 2030. The main concern, as was raised, is that if there is no work done to this property, even if the value of the property has dropped over the course since we bought it, how are we going to intend and entice anyone to want the building after that period if such a substantial amount of work is going to need to be done to it? Who is going to want to pick this property up if such a significant amount of work is going to be needed to be done? And what we don't think we've considered is that there isn't a lot of office space left in Maidstone. A lot of the properties, the office spaces, especially the places behind the Checker Centre, for example, have been transitioned into houses, and that seems to be the way that a lot of our office space is going. And I'm concerned that if we don't have the office space available to us, especially when it's such a central hub to Maidstone itself, and we already look to it as the centre for MBC's office, then where do we plan to be in a couple of years' time? Are we looking to build something specific for when the organisation comes round? I think we could, yes, okay, we may be concerned that it's a substantial amount of money, but I think the crucial work could be looked at as a priority and then evaluated on maybe little bits that we could drop down. At the end of the day, I just think it just doesn't make any sense to cut our losses, because even if we did attempt to get rid of it, I can't see anyone putting it up. I mean, can you demolish it and then build something new on it? Who's going to want to take that property up if we're already at the point where it doesn't seem to have any value to anyone on the committee? So my point is, maybe before we outright disown the building, we should consider what we could do to bring it up to make it a bit more attractive if we are at that point where we want to consider getting rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rodwell next.
I was going to ask on page 38, what really drew my attention was with the benefits and requirements was the reduced corporate risk of building failure from a high to a low with the proposed work. So thinking about what's happened with the systems failure and the fact that, you know, the system is high risk of failing, but what's the time scale on that? I mean, how long, when would you anticipate that everything would implode and everything would stop working?
If I start, and then actually it might be useful for Ms Featherstone to also come in. So in the papers, and actually if you look at the useful life of some of this equipment, especially the mechanical engineering equipment, there's a phrase that stuck in my mind that it has a limp along life expectancy of 1 to 3 years. Now that to me means, as we saw 2 weeks ago, and okay, that was an extenuating circumstance because of heat, but actually the planet doesn't seem to be getting cooler, it seems to go in the opposite direction, that actually we need to make sure it's more robust foundation in the building. And also just on the cost, this is in the budget. We've been accruing this number for 4 years. shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I've only looked at the number for a year. You guys, most of you have been looking at it for much longer. It was put in the budget and approved in February exactly for the purpose that we're debating here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe because we thought you'd already spent 17 million last year. So Councillor Kahili next.
Thank you, Chair. Essentially, my question is about the longevity of Mason House, which is obviously a public asset. So if we don't go ahead with this renovations or make these improvements as proposed, I'm curious to know how much we'd be writing off, which is public money that we would be responsible for. And with regards to longevity, what would happen to that building if it were to become part of a unitary? Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'll start and then the others can come back. Clearly, there's an LGR aspect to local government reorganisation aspect to that. I mean, the council's got a range of properties around the borough that provide us with income. We don't know what will happen when a new unitary authority comes in. It could make a very different decision to the ones that have been made by mostly by my predecessors sitting chairing this meeting in terms of the generate income that support the council's other business. So they could decide to get rid of all of the assets and just have a reduced income and revenue account as well. I think they'd be a bit silly to do that. So one would hope that they take a fairly pragmatic view and continue with the lease of the site for the offices for businesses, such as we've got at Mason House, but also at the Innovation Centre on the Business Terrace and out at Parkwood and so forth. So we've got a number of these places that generate money for us. If they don't, they could sell them. If they sold them with or without the works, it depends on the value of Mason House. It'll have a much higher value with the work done than without the work done. And as we know from the papers, from the yellow papers, that there's only one option that is cost effective and makes a good financial sense, and that's doing the work that we're suggesting. All of the other options lose money above and beyond the money we're going to be putting into this. So yes, they can make decisions. That's the nature of changing politics, but one hopes that there is longevity. In terms of the council offices, that may well move. There may well the new unitary authority will make a decision on where it wants to be, but those offices will be available to rent, and we're hearing quite clearly that there is demand for office space. So in theory, it should generate. I can't see why on earth it wouldn't generate further income for us for the new unitary authority.
Thank you. And yet in Locate, their planning commits them to office units, but they're actually trying to transfer that planning because they're saying there's no requirement for office units at the moment. There's far more requirement for commercial units and small depots and industrial. Councillor Harper, I got you next.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cox.
Sorry, Councillor Harper, but just to capture the moment. So any asset that you buy has a depreciation curve, right? You buy it, it's worth 100% on day one, unless it's a car you drive out of the showroom, it's now worth 80%. And then there'll be a curve as to what it's worth each year thereafter, depending on the condition you keep it in, how many miles you do, you know, what you put it through. That's how asset value works. And if you want to keep an asset valuation high, and I would suggest at the point we're going into LGR, it would be very good to have an asset that is high, A, so it's attractive, but B, so it's got a high resale value. Now, I'm really happy to go into yellow pages, and I'd suggest if you were to debate this properly, we probably should go into yellow pages, but that's your choice. So yeah, how does the asset value remain? It's the same, as I said, as your car, your own house. You have to invest in it, otherwise it will continue to deteriorate. Straightforward. Thank you.
but I don't invest more than my house is worth in my house. Councillor Field, I've got you next. Because I
think it was
ticked
Councillor
you and
Harper.
started and then I went back. So apologies, Councillor Harper, I shouldn't have ticked so early.
All right, thank you, Chair. I do think I agree with Kathy. I think we are going to need to move into yellow papers pretty soon to actually have a sensible discussion about this, because we have to address the figures which are in that confidential thing. That's the basis on which a decision logically has to be made. The information in the white papers can help us to some extent, but I do think if we are reviewing the decision the Cabinet made, they had that yellow paper. And I do remember it was myself at the previous committee when this came up who added I moved the amendment that the Cabinet, when they debated this, have yellow pages before them so that they could look at the financial implications of this. And it was because they received these yellow papers. I didn't attend the Cabinet meeting because they did seem to answer some of the points I was concerned on. I mean, you're right. This has dragged on a long time. I'm probably sitting in this chamber, the only person who was involved in the decision back in 2021 when we agreed at Policy Resources to purchase the property. I think it was the right thing to do. The information presented to us, it was a one-off opportunity for us to purchase the 199-year lease on Maidstone House. It was our council headquarters. No one had ever heard the concept of local government reorganisation, so we assumed it would be the council headquarters for a long period of time. And clearly the building wasn't in great shape, and I can't remember the debate then, but it probably was factored into what we paid for it. And as has been pointed out, and as is in the white paper, we knew all along that there would be the need for follow-up investment in this property. A bit like when we'd made a decision, which I think I was involved with again on Lock Meadow. That when you bought Lock Meadow, we knew there would be follow-on capital costs associated with it. I think, clearly when we see it now, the additional capital cost is very high. And if local government reform reorganisation wasn't on the horizon, I think we could probably assume that we would all like you to support it, because we would think Maidstone Council is going to be here for another 20 or 30 years. It would be, using that building probably as its headquarters and the rest of it. But, the thing what's changed, obviously, is local government reorganisation. We're not going to be here after 2 years. Where on earth they knew if it's West Kent decides to put its headquarters, it could be in Sevenoaks, it could be anywhere, couldn't it? There is an argument that we leave this building in the best possible case so our successors can make a decision on it, as they inevitably will do. And that's why I think we probably need to go into private papers, because you need to have a thought about some of the data. What do we think is what we do need to do? What's the minimum we might need to do? But I think that's why we should be discussing it all tonight, not pushing it onto council tomorrow. So I can't really say much more until we agree to go into yellow papers. I don't know, Chair, as to when you were thinking of moving that.
I've got a couple more people on my list that I'd like to hear from, and I've just got one question. Well, one thing I want to run through from the chair, which I'll do at the end of that. And then I'm proposing at that point, I think everyone that's indicated has wanted to speak, and then I'm happy to go in. Sorry, Councillor Rodwell, did you want to? You want to come back just before we do that? Yeah, okay, I'll pop you back on myself off there. I've got Councillor Oliver next, please. You know what? It's because I keep ticking too far ahead. I've got Councillor Field, I've got Councillor Oliver, I've got Councillor Mackay, and then Councillor Rodwell, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a point about the overall structure of the council. It's not the case that it's just Cabinet overview and scrutiny and full council. This has gone to the relevant policy advisory committee. I also sit here as chair of audit. There's been nothing raised by internal or external audit that would indicate that this project is a risk of note to the council. It's within the capital budget, and whilst there are, as I'm sure you all know from your in-depth reading of the audit papers, risks that are alluded to in terms of the overall capital budget, there is nothing that has been brought to the audit committee's attention about this specific project. A couple of other things. First of all, I don't accept that this is an unconventional proposal, as has been explained to us by cabinet members. There are existing parts of the building that are already upgraded to this standard, as well as others in the borough. Also, it remains central government policy that we move towards net zero. It remains the policy of the council, as agreed at full council, that this authority moves towards net zero, and 17% is a sizable chunk of achieving that goal. I also would dispute the relevance of local government reform. The asset is an asset of this council, and it will be pooled with other assets as and when local government reform is forthcoming. I believe it's incumbent upon this authority to take every possible step to ensure that asset management is done in a timely and cost-efficient manner, and further refurbishment in a couple of years is only going to be more expensive than refurbishment if we start along the timelines that are proposed within the papers. We may not be sitting here as Maidstone Borough Council. We will all still be paying council tax in Maidstone. So the increased cost for the successor authority in terms of bringing it up to code so that they can maximise the potential income from the office space as outlined in the papers to comply with national government policy around EPC, etc., will fall on the same residents that we represent this evening. So I don't believe that it's a material factor in terms of the overall decision that local government review is going to take place. There are other things that I think merit discussion, but I would hold those until we are in closed session on yellow pages. I would also ask if we could have a small comfort break at that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nearly all of your words that you said then, you could have used for the leisure centre. So it is a choice.
I did not refer to the leisure centre on the grounds that it was not on the papers or not up for debate.
I'm aware.
And I wouldn't like to second guess what I may have said about the leisure centre were it.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Just on your point, obviously the leisure centre doesn't have a 2-year lifespan on its heating system. It does have more longevity than this. This is quite a critical point in as far as our buildings goes. The leisure centre has got a life.
Thank you. Councillor Kahili, yes, Councillor Oliver, sorry. Oh, get it right.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. So anecdotally, I know 2 of the tenants in Maidstone House, they're high-tech software companies. They like that building because it's central and you don't need a car to get to. So there's a lot of employees, younger employees who don't have cars. They looked at Turkey Mill and they rejected it because there's no lunch facilities and you would need a car. So that idea of having premium quality offices in the town centre is something we need to take note of. There's lots of offices, but a lot of them are pretty poor quality. So having the best would make it a rental opportunity. The other thing I was going to ask is, have we looked at making sure that local suppliers are doing the work that is suggested? Because obviously that would help employment figures and jobs, as well as transferable skills for other buildings, etc., to make sure that we keep it within the local economy. Finally, that 2030 deadline, like, it seems to me like if we kick that can down the road, a bad decision will be made under pressure as opposed to doing something now. So yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rodwell. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. I think there's been an awful lot of talk tonight about nothing, because we can't make a decision until we decide whether we're going to read the yellow pages. Now, quite frankly, as I see it, the most sensitive piece of information on the yellow pages has been revealed. There is nothing, as I can see, in yellow pages that breaches anybody's confidentiality. I may be wrong on a slight error, on that. And like I said, the rabbit is out of the hat. If you say we're not going to discuss this in public, then people are going to assume there's some dodgy dealings going to go on. And so I would much prefer this to go to council. Then we need to agree to yellow pages. Then we can make an informed decision.
Councillor Cox, did you want to come in there? Sorry. Quick.
Just very quickly on Councillor Oliver's question, it might be useful if Ms Featherstone just elaborated on that point about supply chain. Thank you.
I think we've moved on, so quickly.
Thank you for your question. I'll briefly respond. We're looking at an open market approach this time around because previously a lot of the frameworks are very limited to only certain tier one contractors. It was really refreshing to see out of all the responses we had that a quarter were actually local in the fact that they were at least Maidstone or Medway. And one of them, which obviously I wouldn't name for commercial sensitivity, has already a large presence in the town centre and local hospitals, etc.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want a week.
Councillor Rodwell.
Oh, sorry.
So, thinking about the time limited thing, I just want to go back to the original desired outcome on this call-in, and it was the desired outcome is a more cost-effective outcome is identified and agreed, be it conventional or green, and I take slight exception to green and conventional being in direct opposition there. A green replacement of the current plant serving the Maidstone House estate. So if we're talking a viable alternative, a more cost-effective alternative, rather than just scrapping the whole thing. So what is the alternative that's conventional to air source heat pumps and solar? And what would happen if we go down the conventional routes?
Keep us in part one, Councillor Cox, because I think if we start itemising the different things, we're going to two, aren't we? So, Councillor Cox.
Yeah, and just before I answer Councillor Rodwell's question, if I was sitting in investment committee now at a bank, wherever, and we were only looking at the summary paper and not getting into the Excel detail, we'd be out of the door. The detail's there for a reason. But to your point, I think it would be really interesting to hear from Ms Featherstone, from Charlotte, on actually, and keeping it in white paper, how much of the element of what's being proposed here, and Charlotte's been working on this for 9 months, she's sort of like it's been her sole project, she knows it inside out. How much of it is greening and how much of it is mechanical and engineering based? Because if we don't fix it, it's going to break. I think that would be really interesting to hear.
So will you run us down the items on page 34 then and say essential, greening, nice to haves, without mentioning money?
34 or 35, sorry.
In mine, it's 34.
Yeah.
I think we need to get a grasp on what's this, is all of this essential? Is it greening? Is it electrical? What is it? And then it was asked about, because following on from Councillor Rodwell was asking about the difference between the things, or is that not what you were getting at?
Well, I just wanted to bring it back to the original design, the original thing on the call-in form, and that's what I was relating to. And I just wanted an answer based on what was suggested in the call-in.
Hopefully I can answer your query. So if we are going to work through the list, obviously the top headline here, install air source heat pumps, ducting and all associated M&E. At the moment, the buildings are interlinked, so the link cannot exist and function without Maidstone House. So on that basis, whatever you do with the technologies, if you're going down the conventional route, you can either choose to separate or keep the link remaining. Something just to consider is that if they are separated and you're looking at resale value, you actually will be able to sell at a higher price because they are individual buildings. At the moment, they're not individual buildings. So that's not been tested. We can't give quantifying figures on that, but that's something to consider. You could not use the technology of air source heat pumps. You could go down the route of air conditioning on its own. So just air conditioning units, traditional cooling towers, etc. And that would need to work in sympathy with what we actually currently have, and it would also need to work in sympathy with building regulations. So what I would say is if it is that fossil fuel technologies are desired, we would need to look in detail about how efficient that is moving forward, as well as just the headline cost for that, which I'll come back to in a moment. Something here about replacing the boiler and reception area of a mini standalone electric system. That's very small in the budget. It's already its own standalone system. Replace hot water systems with electric point of use at both buildings. Again, that's just going from a very, very archaic old system with an old boiler, an old cold water storage tank, which needs replacing anyway. Replace and upgrade air handling units for both buildings. That's non-negotiable for both proposals, be that conventional as it's been described or new. There's actually a legal limit to how much air is circulated for people to occupy those buildings. That's non-negotiable. The 6th floor ceiling soffit insulation and roof membrane. The roof membrane is non-negotiable. It will become uninsurable very soon. Unfortunately, it could cost us significant damage and also to the building structure, which as part of our leasehold, we are responsible for ensuring no damage is reasonably done to the structure, which would leave us in a big legal mess. Not to mention that we're also kind of placed on top of a shopping centre beneath us. It needs to be considered. The soffit insulation, you could call that a shopping list item. But if you don't insulate the ceiling above you, obviously heat escapes out of the building, so the running costs will be higher. Currently, the 6th floor is one of the worst zones where we receive the most complaints from people on the perimeter. The roof membrane recovering at the link, again, is shortly going to become completely non-negotiable. Insurance, not pleased. There's pooling on the roof. It's a danger to people working there. And again, it has had significant leaks in the last few years. Interior secondary glazing, it could be considered a nice to have. However, again, if you don't consider a fabric first approach to your project, you're just spending money on running systems where the heat and cooling escapes out the window. We've got the full ground floor single glazing. Again, I think that speaks for itself. You could just leave the glazing as it is, but single glazing is very old-fashioned, more so than conventional. Again, the tenant on the ground floor often complains of how that felt temperature is. Insulate internally, answered the question already there, I believe, with the interior glazing, the same applies for that. Repaint and recarpet of 5 and 6. Many of you may be familiar with the patchwork kind of look of the carpet and the walls in there. It's a low budget figure to encourage better working conditions, creativity, co-creation amongst staff. You know, their common parts area where they go to the toilet looks nicer than the office that they work in. It's just something to consider. The solar array on the link roof, as many of you have different opinions on solar, which I completely appreciate, it does generate a financial return, and it's an integral part of this project to ensure that there is additional financial return. Provide alternative office accommodation for staff of up to 140 during the works, including IT network install. We could ask all staff to work from home for 6 months. We could ask them to do that. But in doing so, the loss of recruitment, the loss of productivity, there are lots of things that we could go into further detail if required. It's not something that corporate leadership team feel is the right thing to do. And feedback that we received from staff last time around was that people were dead against having nowhere to work together for that period of time. Provide alternative temporary meeting and corporate function for NBC in the business terrace. Again, I think that's the same as the response that I've just provided. Compensation or incentive payments to tenants. Again, I think that goes without saying, if you sign a lease, if you have the duty to accommodate people in office space, you can't expect them just to walk away from that for free. That has to be done, not only just for our legal, but also, you want to keep the tenants, you want to encourage more tenants. So that has been costed with some room, of course. Yeah, and I think that's everything there. Sorry for the amount of time. Cheers.
Thank you, and thank you for running through that list. I think it was helpful. Councillor Parfitt, I've got you next.
Yeah, I suppose I just wanted to bring it back to, yes, it's great that we're debating this here, but my point has always been that this needs to go to all councillors. And I know that ultimately the decision will be made by the Cabinet, but I think it is really important that the Cabinet have the opportunity to hear from all councillors at full council. So we can debate it here and we can go into all this detail, but my central point is everybody needs to have a say when we're looking at spending this amount of money. Thank you.
Point of order.
Yeah, Councillor Field.
That's not the desired outcome that you signed up to on the call-in form. The desired outcome that you want, per the papers, was a more cost-effective outcome is identified and agreed, be it a conventional or green replacement of current plant serving the Maidstone House estate. You have subsequently.
I am allowed to. I am allowed to add to my point.
One at a time, Councillor Field, and then
This
Councillor
evening
Parfitt.
change that, but the decision before the committee is the call-in. Now you can put a motion that you want to abandon what you wanted in your call-in and do that instead. That's fine, but all that the rest of the committee is doing is reacting to the call-in that was made, which would be that this committee would make an alternative decision this evening. So I feel you're rather moving the goalposts.
Councillor Parfitt. Councillor Parfitt, did you want to come back? Right, I think that's a sensible way forward. I am going to take a vote on whether we move into part 2. And then if that falls, I'm coming back to the motion. So can I have votes in favour of moving into part 2 to discuss more financial aspects of the scheme? That's 7. Can I have votes against? That's 5. So we will be moving into part 2 to discuss some more financial aspects. I'm really conscious we've been going for a very long time, so I'm going to have a comfort break now for 10 minutes, and that will take us to 5 to, no, let's take it to the hour. 9 o'clock we're going to go to, because it makes it easier. Thank you. Okay, the feed is back, everybody, and we're back in part one. So welcome back to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday the 15th of July at 9:46. We have got a motion on the table, which is to take this item to be discussed and debated at full council tomorrow. The proposer of that motion is Councillor Cannon. Let me just read out the wording that I've got from that, which is, the committee feels that the proposal represents a significant spend for the council and warrants further scrutiny by all members of the council, having been elected to serve residents of the whole borough, and therefore recommend that the decision be reviewed by the full council at its meeting on the 16th of July 2025. And I had the seconder as Councillor Parfitt. Are you two happy with that wording?
Yes, I'm happy with that wording, and I'd also like it to be a recorded vote if possible.
Okay, your request for a recorded vote, we need 3 members of the committee. So that's Councillor Cannon, Councillor Cook and Councillor Parfitt. So we'll be taking a recorded vote, everybody, and I'll be knocking my microphone and going round the room in a clockwise fashion. So the proposal is to take it to full council. Councillor Cannon?
Yes, to full council. Take it to full council.
That's 4. Councillor Cook?
4.
Councillor Parfitt? 4. Councillor Mackay?
4.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Against.
Councillor Harper?
Against.
Councillor Nagy?
Against.
Councillor Field?
Against.
Councillor Rodwell? Councillor Kahili?
Against.
Councillor Oliver?
Against.
And Councillor Russell 4. The motion falls. So that means we now refer back to our available options on the paper, which are available to us on page 28. So we've got that we've reviewed the original decision made and agreed that no further action is required, recommend an alternative decision to Cabinet, and the third one's fallen away. So that was recommend that the decision be reviewed by full council. So I need somebody to work up a proposal for one of the other 2. We're on page 28 of the agenda. I mean, I couldn't see anyone reaching for an alternative decision, so I think my proposal is that we review the original decision made and agree that no further action is required. Is that a wording that anyone would be prepared to go for propose a seconder?
Happy to propose that.
Councillor Field proposes and Councillor Kahili seconds. So votes in favour of that, which is the Overview and Scrutiny reviewed the original decision made and agreed that no further action is required. Votes in favour? Votes against? Abstentions? That was an abstention from Councillor Mackay, yeah. Okay, that motion passes and that concludes this item. And I believe that concludes our agenda. Thank you very much for this evening's attendance and thank you for looking at it all in such detail. Meeting closed.